I know, isn't it? Yeah. I wish you could just have like a whole row. Wouldn't you give a hedge out of rosemary? It smells. Every time you walk past it, the beautiful purple flowers. You stop and sniff, have a little snack. I don't think I'm gonna need this because I'm loud, so. One more minute, we'll wait till one more minute. Yeah. And you know what one of the top 10 is? I was amazed when I started researching this. Chives are in the top 10 list of pollinators.
Wow, I did not know that.
Mm-hmm. And we go. Good morning. Thanks to everyone for taking the time to join us here today. My name is Hitachi Tankersley. I'm an advanced master gardener, master composter with the University of Idaho Extension Office. And today I'm talking about, like I mentioned earlier, one of my favorite things, which is food. And all of our herbs, of course, are edibles. They fall into three different categories. We have the annual herbs. And of course, an annual plant is one that completes its entire life cycle in one season. So you'll put your seed in the ground, your plant will grow foliage, it'll produce new seed, then it will die with the first frost. Some examples of the herbs that are in those. Can you guys hear me okay? Do I need the microphone? Okay. Basil is one of those. So you have basil outside in your garden. When it freezes, it's going to die. Cilantro, same thing. When it freezes, it's going to die. Then you'll have some herbs that are biennials. Parsley is a good example of a biennial. Year one, it grows foliage. Year two, we have seed production. So you'll think that your parsley is living forever because it self-seeds and grows, but it's the mother plant that you put in there originally oftentimes doesn't survive. And depending on climate, of course, which ones will or won't survive. We had a rosemary plant, which was a perennial. Our rosemary seems to do very well here and will overwinter 90% of the time. Was about 7 or 8 years old at the front door of the extension office when we had Snowmageddon a few years back. That was the end of that guy. It was just too much snow, too cold, and it killed it. But yeah, I have the plants that I grow, and I grow all of these herbs in my garden. My basil's in a pot. And I put one in the soil in my garden, knowing that I'm going to eat basil because it's one of my favorites all year long. And so I'll put my basil plant in the soil, and I'll put one in the pot as well. When fall comes, the pot comes in the house and lives with me in the kitchen. And you can harvest it all year long. But what we're going to talk about is how to harvest these items. We'll start with our woody one here, rosemary. When you're getting ready to harvest your herbs, you're going to want to look on your stalk where you have a node, so where you've got something else growing out of that. And you're going to want to harvest when you're clipping it. You'll find where your node is, where you've got some more stalks, and you will use your pruners or your scissors or whatever you happen to have handy, and you'll snip that off. This now becomes the piece that you're going to cook with or use or freeze or do whatever you want to with. By trimming it off there, you've now told this plant it needs to create a new top. And so these will start growing. They'll keep your plant bushy all year round. And then these will start putting out new ones that will come up as well. And so you can prune for eating it, and you can prune for the shape of what you want your plant to be. When you're doing these heavy woody herbs, my favorite thing to do with them, prune them, put a rubber band on them, hang them to dry. That's how difficult it is. And the woody herbs dry very, very well like that. You can dry them that way. I have a dehydrator machine that I put mine on. And what you'll want to do with your herbs, if you go to this grocery store and you buy herbs and spices, get this little jar, it's like $10, and they're pulverized, and they're all chopped up. Your flavors come out when you mash these leaves, cut these leaves. So I leave mine whole. I'll dry this whole stalk. When I want some, I'll just pick a few leaves off once they're dry. And rosemary dries very, very well. Another one that dries really well is oregano. And oregano is good fresh, and it's just my preference probably, but I like it better dry than fresh. And you'll want to harvest your herbs. You'll want to water. You want to harvest them early in the day before the flavor compounds get baked in our hot sun, and they lose a lot of that. Harvest them, rinse them off, let them dry. again, a woody one, you can do this. You typically want to harvest before they start to bloom. I pruned this one this morning out of here, your best flavors before the blooming starts. That's oregano. Another way you can use this herb in the future, you can dry it. You can freeze these. Leaves that are kind of low and flat like this freeze very, very well. And so I'll pull the leaves off, put them on a sheet tray, put the sheet tray in the freezer. Once they're frozen, scoop them off, put them in a Ziploc bag, seal it up, and they don't stick together because they're frozen individually. So when you want 1 or 2 or 3, pick them out of the bag, seal it back up, throw it back in the freezer. Another thing you can do with your heavier, woodier herbs, or any herbs really, is you can make oils. This is my rosemary oil. And this, I chop up some, I leave some of the larger leaves in there because they continue to give off flavor. But you want to chop up some as well to release those flavor compounds. I now have rosemary oil. If I'm making a salad dressing, get some out, cooking something you want rosemary in, put some in that, and you've got it already ready to go. Other ways you can use your herbs in terms of drying those or keeping those, preserving those, you can do compound butters. I love tarragon, and I have a couple recipes that use tarragon butter. I get a stick of butter, I let it soften, I mash it up, I chop up my tarragon, I stir it all together, I put it on wax paper and roll it into a log and put it in the freezer. Take it out, unroll it, cut off how many sections I want, roll it back up, back in the freezer it goes again. So you've got it there and readily available for use through the future. You want to harvest your herbs, like I said, early in the morning before the heat has a chance to take all the flavor compounds out. And herbs, most of the herbs that we have, the woody ones especially, are very drought tolerant. They love living here. They like hot, they like dry. And so you can plant them, and they're minimal care. They're quite xeric. Of course, all plants need water, but you don't have to keep them as wet as you do some other plants. A lot of them do great in pots. Because my tender herbs, like the ones that don't survive winter, the basil, cilantro, in pots. Cilantro also doesn't really care for the really hot summer, so it'll start to bolt and go to seed. So you can keep it in the shade, at least hot afternoon shade. Will certainly make it do a lot better as well. Just a fun fact too, we are the only nation on earth that calls the coriander plant cilantro in foliage and coriander as seeds. Everywhere else in the world is coriander always. And cilantro is coriandum, is the technical name for it, the Latin name. Lavender, oftentimes people don't think about lavender as being an herb, but it is. And as we mentioned, chives are the top 10 pollinators, and they are indestructible. I've grown them here. I lived in eastern Idaho for a long time, grew them in zone 3. Every part of the chive plant is edible. Flowers, foliage, and that's the one when you're harvesting these, when you're harvesting your herbs, you want to harvest them up until about 5 weeks before frost, then let them go, so that they can replenish themselves, other than the tender ones. The ones that aren't going to survive winter, you can cut them right to the ground up until the frost. When you're cutting your tender herbs, like your parsley, the biennial, or your basil, an annual, you'll want to treat them like a cut flower for other than basil. Cut them off, put them in water, stick them in the refrigerator. Don't refrigerate your basil. Refrigerate your basil, it immediately turns black. Just cut it, put it in some water, stick it on the counter. And it's good for 3 to 5 days. The perennial ones, of course, the oregano, the rosemary, the thyme, which is one of my favorites, sage. Sage is an excellent one to freeze on a sheet tray because it's a large leaf. You don't want to pulverize your leaves until you're ready to use them. When you're ready to use them, then you crumble them up and you get that great scent. And that's the flavors. When you're smelling, you're getting the flavor from it as well. Different ways you can dry them. These I just harvested this morning from here. Cut them off, put a rubber band around them, hang them to dry. Cut them off, put them on I have like drying racks. I put it on top of a cake pan before to set them on top of that, put them on top of my dryer. They sit there until they turn dry. You can use commercial items to do it. You can dry them in your microwave. Put a couple layers of paper towel down, put your herbs on, put another couple layers on top of that. 1 minute increments. I found 3 minutes is about the perfect time, but it depends on how much moisture is in your leaves. Just separate them as to however you want to use those. If you're going to take these, you pull the parsley leaves off, lay them on there, and then freeze and or dry them that way. Of course, you can do the butters. You can put them in water into ice cube trays. Just put your herbs in ice cube trays, put a little water, and you get like a cube, which you can throw in there. Your tender herbs, like the parsley, the basil, if you have frozen those and you're going to use them for culinary use, you want to put them in after you finish the cooking process. Otherwise, it basically leaches all of the flavor out, and then it gets more of the fresh, actual herb flavor when you're cooking. Let's see. This is my second time for doing this today, so I can remember where I'm at. But yeah, you can see here we have all the herbs we have in our garden here, and a lot of them are labeled. So you can come by here and see the kind of things that we have. Thyme is one of my favorite herbs. I don't have it on display, but it's there too. It's another one of those woody herbs. It's very low growing, so it's great ground cover. And like I said, very drought tolerant. So my garden is not veggie garden, flower garden. Mine is everything garden. I have tomato plants growing in my front yard from the neighborhood. So yeah, you can plant, intermingle all these things, whatever your personal preference is of how you want things to be. And we do have some herb plants for sale over at our market here. We've got some herbs that have been harvested that some of the folks have brought in that are available if you want some of those. My favorite tool is this guy. And I've had it for probably 20 years. And it's an herb scissor, but you'll see that it has many little scissors on there. So when you're harvesting your herb and using it culinarily, you don't have to chop it. It does all of that right there for you in one little swoop. So it's really, really handy. I think I paid, when I bought it 20 years ago, I think I got it from Bed Bath & Beyond. It had a little pot that it was in, and it maybe 15 bucks. So it wasn't very expensive. And then if anyone has any questions about this too, when you're doing your herbs, if you have a recipe that you're going to use, like pestos, basil and pesto, make the pesto and freeze up. Put all those things right there in it when you're doing it. And Wasp wants to join us here today. But yeah, prune your plants to maintain the shape. Like I said, the best thing you can do is harvest early in the day before the hot sun bakes all the flavor compounds out. Anybody have any questions or anything? Yes, Andy.
Do you cut your sage to the ground in the winter, or do you just let it overwinter?
I let it overwinter.
Okay, so mine is like huge, and I've always let it overwinter, and it's gorgeous. But I was thinking, am I doing it wrong?
What I do with most of my herbs are, what do I think I'm going to need for cooking through the course of the winter? I'll harvest all of that. But I am terrible when it comes to making a good plan for my garden. And so I'll go out and say, well, I found a new plant. And of course I want one of everything. I go out and start to dig and, oh my gosh, there was somebody already there. Now I've dug you up. So yeah, I try to leave something on my plant so I know where it is. And my sage plant's the same. I mean, it's this big around. So I'll harvest the outer edges, but I'll leave the center so I can locate it.
And the bees love it.
Oh yeah, and the herbs are great pollinators. A lot of them you'll see them when they bloom. You'll see bees, you'll see hummingbirds, you'll see all kinds of the pollinators all over them all the time. Yes?
Are the herbs that are for sale, are they all perennial?
Yes, yeah, all the ones we have here today, I believe are perennials. We've got some thyme, some rosemary, and the rosemary, there's different varieties of rosemary, the ARP rosemary, and these that we have here are from plants we've established, we know grow here.
Oh, okay.
And now's a great time to put them in because we've got 5 to 8 weeks of still summer where they have time to get their roots established before winter gets here. So now's a terrific time to plant those kinds of things.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Can you talk a little bit about the cilantro and how it doesn't really grow in the summer, but it grows great in the fall?
Yeah, it grows great. It grows great early in the spring and it grows great early in the fall. It does not like the heat. As soon as it gets hot, it wants to bolt, which is to go to produce flowers and produce seed. So my cilantro is in a pot always. I never put it in the soil. And in the spring, it's on the east side of my house because it's the early sun. And then when it starts getting really hot, I put it on the north side, so it's in the shade. And it seems to fare, because it's in the pot and it's mobile, it seems to fare a whole lot better. And I can get cilantro for probably 80% of the season.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But I've got a pot that, I have to use my hand part to move it because it's like this.
Yeah.
And I have 3 or 4 different herbs in it.
Okay.
And then what I will do too is on some of those large pots that I have, I like to strike it in my garage for there too. Because for the plants, but for the degradation of the pot. Because the freeze-thaw cycle, your pots will crack and break. And once they're dormant in the winter, they don't care if they have sunlight or not. So
like in the pot that you have the cilantro in, what are some of the other herbs that would go good with the cilantro?
I put all mine in together. I've got thyme in there, I've got oregano in there, I've got the cilantro in there, I've got a rosemary in there. I'll plant a basil in there every year, just a new one because it's an annual. I'll tuck one of those in there, but the pot really, it's probably 3.5 feet across. It's gigantic, and it's this tall. Oh, it's huge. I cannot reach around it, Sandy. It's gigantic. Takes my hand truck with the straps to be able to wheel it to the garage. It moves from here to one of those parking slots, from in the garage to the front of the garage. That's where it lives in summer. Yes.
When you're making the oils, do you use it with fresh, or do you dry the herbs first before
I
you
use them
stick
fresh.
Okay.
Yeah, you put them in there fresh. Like I said, I put some whole leaves in there, but I also chop up some because you want to get those flavor compounds to release in the oil. And on the oils too, you'll want to use a good quality oil. So I use grapeseed oil, I use extra virgin olive oil. I'm reading a book right now that's called Genius Food. It says you should never, as a human, consume canola oil, corn oil, those kind of things because of the heat process. The way they process it for consumption is they cook it so hot that it destroys everything that's good for you in there.
Oh, wow.
So basically, it's an oil slick is all it is. So.
Yeah. Huh.
No, olive oils, extra virgin cold pressed olive oils, no. But look at your labels. Look at your labels, because I've seen olive oil that says olive oil. Look at the back of the label. No, it's olive oil and canola oil and some other things in there. So.
So mixing the powder with the fresh herb.
Yeah.
How long will that keep?
In case I find about 3 months on the counter and up to 6 months in the refrigerator. If you're using olive oil, of course, when you tip the refrigerator, it kind of solidifies. You have to get it out of, an hour before you want to use it to let it kind of loosen back up again. But I use it for salad dressing. I eat salad every single day of my life. I love greens. And so, yeah, this is a spoonful of this, a spoonful of vinegar, stir, eat my tomatoes and lettuce. Yes. You certainly can. You can freeze them in oil, you can freeze them in water. They don't care. Or you can just lie them on a sheet tray and let it, and the reason you put them on a sheet tray is so the leaves don't stick together. So you just spread a thin layer, and then you can scoop them up once they're frozen and put them in a Ziploc bag. Then if you want 5 leaves or 10 leaves, you can just fish those out, and it's not a big wad, so you have to break some of it off. And you can make pastos, you can make it into a sauce or whatever to freeze as well. But I've frozen them in water and I've frozen them in oil both. Pardon me? I think I like oil, and the reason I like oil is because so many of the flavonoids and the compounds are released or oil soluble. The vitamins are. So I like to put mine in oil, especially the hearty ones like the rosemary and I find too, because I grow oregano and I love Italian food, that I like dried oregano better than fresh, because it seems to give off more flavor, and you can use it. If it's a dried herb, you can put it earlier in the cooking process, so it flavors everything. But I put some fresh or frozen ones on there too, because you get that little snap of something fresh. And even though it's the middle of winter, you think, oh my gosh, I got something green in there. It's just nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
Have you ever combined your herbs in a frozen, like a scoop tray?
I'm not in ice, but I have in butters. Because tarragon's one of my favorite. I have a really super recipe for tarragon, and so I do buttered tarragon. But I put tarragon and rosemary and oregano and parsley all together in a compound butter. I just find it, yeah. I like the butters because you can add that, because of course butter makes everything better. Yeah, you can put it in the end of the cooking process. Those flavors are just so dynamic. Yeah, they're so fun to make. And I was at I shop at Fred Meyer, just close to my house. I was at the Fred Meyer, and they had Challenge butter, which now butter's like $6-7 a pound.
Yes.
It was all going to expire in like 20 days. For 99 cents a pound, I bought 10.
Put it in the freezer.
And I put them in the freezer, thinking, and now that I'm harvesting herbs, I'm going to make compound butters. They're going back in the freezer. Yeah, it might expire in 10 days, but it's not going to be out of the freezer for more than 10 days before I use it. So
Yeah.
perfect. So I saved a ton of money, and I get a whole bunch of good food.
Great deal.
Yeah. As we all know, is going to the grocery store, things are just getting more and more expensive every
Yes.
single day. So yeah. And I'm kind of a naysayer, so I'm concerned about the status of our world. So I want to be self-sufficient.
Yes. Yes.
So Sandy well knows, I grow microgreens all year round. I've bought probably 3 heads of lettuce in the last 2 years, and I have
Grow
salad
everything else.
every single day of my life. Next year we'll do microgreens in our gardens.
Yeah. That'd be cool.
Yeah. Yeah, they're super. They're so simple. Yeah.
Do you do it in your grow lights?
Now,
No, just in
do my kitchen window. Yeah. Yeah. and same thing there too. And I'm a composter also, so I'm big on recycling, and so I eat lots of mushrooms. And those little plastic trays the mushrooms come from the grocery store, those are what I use for growing my microgreens. Recycled plastic pot again and again and again. They last forever. They're terrific. And it's just, and I'm widowed, so